Bob, would you mind introducing Norman?
Great. So I'm Bob Henley, and I've been a reporter and editor with public radio with WBGO long enough at WNYC to get a pensions, yay unions. And now I'm working as interim general manager at BAI, and we've been working in a wonderful collaboration with Ursula Rutenberg, Stephanie Schubert, Lisa Loving, and the Pacific affiliates going back to, I guess, the conventions. Oh my goodness. And so today we're so fortunate to have Norman Siegel, who's one of the nation's leading experts on the intersectionality of civil liberties and the First Amendment and news gathering. And I say that not just because he was head of the New York City Liberties Union from 1985 to 2000, but that I've always noticed whenever we were in a struggle as journalists, I've looked to my right, there was Norman Siegel. And a very practical example would be when the city of New York insisted that the police department should hand out police credentials for press and actually control that. And what would happen would be that a reporter would lose their job because they were reporting too honestly, perhaps, and then they'd start an internet component for their work to continue their work covered under the First Amendment, and they'd be denied a press pass because they did their job too well. And enter Don Quixote, Norman Siegel, took on that case, and we wrested control of credentialing the press from the NYPD. So that's about the best way that I can introduce Norman as someone that, while he's not, I'll make him an honorary journalist, he understands exactly what we're trying to do and what we're up against. And so I'm going to hand it over to Norman, but first I want to just set it up with an opening kind of scene setter, which is right now in the United States in this current circumstance. We have 35 states that have signed on to the federal government, to ICE. And what's happened is they've integrated the immigration function of the ICE and Homeland Security and Border Patrol. And in the other jurisdictions, they haven't done that. And so you brought to my attention that that means that in the states where they have signed on, if we saw in Washington, D.C., it's led to a massive integration of police municipal function and federal immigration policing. So you could find yourself in one of those states or even Washington, D.C., pulled over or apprehended by local law enforcement, and then find yourself caught up in the ICE immigration circumstance, which means people could not know that you were being detained. So, in that setting right now, reporters, I'd imagine, have to know what is the nature of the state they're in. Are they a state that is so called sanctuary, hasn't signed on like that? And then also, you just brought to my attention just recently this decision from the Honorable Sarah Ellis out of Chicago, where the Chicago Deadline Club, acting in the interest of journalists, went to seek a temporary restraining order because of what Customs and Border Patrol were doing in real time. And in it, in the 6-page order, which I quickly read and you're familiar with in detail, Judge Ellis lays out the framework that we really need to take to heart. So anyway, that's a setup, Norman. Give us the 360 of the as the reporters and editors as we go out to try to do this work. What's the nature of the nation we're in right now? Norm?
Is
I think
Norman
he's
hear me?
frozen.
froze?
Yeah, there he is.
Okay,
Oh, okay.
so the First Amendment is the key. It explicitly provides for freedom of the press. Language in the First Amendment says Congress can make no law abridging freedom of the press. And it's not just Congress, it's the state, it's the municipality, the local town, the village, etc. You're absolutely correct, Bob. People need to know whether or not they're in a city where the state has provided sanctuary protection or not. That's important. But what it really means is that it means, in my opinion, the right for reporters to cover and report the news truthfully and honestly. It means reporters have the right to video law enforcement in public spaces, providing, and this is important, they do not interfere with the law enforcement doing their job. So the right applies to public spaces, not to private places, unless the owners of the private space give permission. Now, while exercising doing their job. My suggestion is to stand at least 10 feet away from the interaction that you're trying to video or record. If you are interfering with law enforcement doing their job, you could be charged with one of three things: obstruction of government administration, disorderly conduct, which means you're not obeying a lawful order. The key is lawful order, or possibly, depending on the facts, resisting arrest. Now, the defense to these charges: one, you're not interfering with the officer doing their job. And two, if the officer tells you to disperse and you're on a public property, it's not a lawful order. And finally, on the resisting arrest, that's very serious because, for example, New York, if it's a disorderly conduct, it's only a violation, which means it's not a crime. So when you're asked if you're ever being convicted of a crime, you don't have to answer yes if it's just disorderly conduct. But if you're resisting arrest, it's now become a misdemeanor at a minimum, and then you've committed a crime. So what I always told all the reporters and protesters: do not, under any circumstances, put your hand on top. Furthermore, don't resist. Don't get into an argument and be your own lawyer out on the street, criticizing or saying that you don't have the right to do this to me. Save all of that until you have your lawyer. And then the lawyer will make that argument in a court proceeding, and it'll be dismissed. And furthermore, if in fact they do rough you up, especially if they break a bone or stitches, you can bring what's called a 1983 action against the officer in the municipality. And if you substantially prevail, your lawyers can get attorney's fees, which means a lot of civil rights lawyers will take the case even without paying them up front. So those are kind of the things that I want to just basically point out. And the other thing is, sometimes on large demonstrations, especially this Saturday, at least in New York, the NYPD will set up a press area. And sometimes it's confined by metal barriers or wooden barriers. You can stay in there, but my belief on the First Amendment is that you have a right to be wherever the public is, and you can move around. Just be aware when you do that, the police will probably come over and tell you, you can't be here, you got to be in that designated area. You don't have to. And again, if you're in the public space, if they say they're going to arrest you or you have to disperse, you have a right to be there. But I wouldn't get into an argument with them. Save that for the lawyers. Now, a very important decision came down a week ago today. Bob, I sent it to him this morning. I think, and Bob said, okay, every person who's doing anything with Pacific or radio, BII in New York, et cetera, should get a copy of this decision. It's only 6 pages. And this morning I circled some of the paragraphs that I think are most important, so that if you don't have time to read all 6 pages, just do the ones that I circled in blue ink. But I just want to read a little of it because this decision, this judge is now another one of my heroes during this very unprecedented period in American history. So it's the Chicago Deadline Club versus Christy Nome et al. And it's in the Northern District of Illinois, Eastern District, Eastern Division. So that means this decision is for the reporters in Chicago. But it also sets the precedent. So if someone in New York, LA, where I'm speaking on Saturday in Hudson, New York, in Columbia County, upstate, if any of the things that I'm reading to you now happen there, I think people could go in on Monday to the court to then get a temporary restraining order, a preliminary injunction, preventing from this kind of action from happening again, and potentially can also get some damages if their rights were violated. And the people who were sponsoring them or employing them, retaining them, whatever, shouldn't be cowardly. This is stuff that you have to take on because we can't allow the law enforcement people to do this stuff. One key in Chicago that I've noticed is they brought the Border Patrol. In Chicago, they try to argue like Lake Michigan was the border, that people were coming from Canada into Illinois to Chicago. So I could see the smiles on your faces. That's exactly right. I mean, that's laughable. But this is an administration that makes this stuff up, tries to get away with it. And of course, they didn't get away with it in Chicago. So it says here that the judge hereby orders that the defendants, their officers, their agents, etc., are enjoined temporarily. And this is through October 23rd, what means this Saturday. This is in effect for Chicago. Are enjoined from, I'm not going to read all of them, but I'll give you a sense of it. First one, they're enjoined from dispersing, arresting, threatening to arrest, threatening or using physical force against any person whom they know or reasonably should know is a journalist, unless defendants have probable cause to believe that the individual has committed a crime. Defendants may order a journalist to change location to avoid disrupting law enforcement, so long as the journalist has an objectively reasonable time to comply, an objectively reasonable opportunity to report and observe. 2, issuing a crowd dispersal order requiring any person to leave a public place, key public, that they lawfully have a right to be, unless dispersal is justified by exigent circumstances, and they define it by the Homeland Security policy. Furthermore, for purposes of this order, a crowd dispersal order is a lawful command given by a federal agent for all persons to leave a designated area when 3 or more persons are committing acts of disorderly conduct that are likely to cause substantial harm in the immediate vicinity. She then goes on and defines what she considers to be riot control weapons and says that none of it can be used on members of the press, protesters who are not posing an immediate threat to the safety of a law enforcement officer or others. The riot control weapons she defines in the next few paragraphs very specifically and basically saying they can't use any of that unless there's exigent circumstances. The other part that's very important for reporters is the following paragraph, K, to facilitate the defendant's identification of journalists protected under this order. The following are examples of indicia of being a journalist. The judge is anticipating details, such as a visual identification as a member of the press, such as by carrying a professional press pass, badge, or credentials, wearing distinctive clothing or patches that identify the wearer as a member of the press, or carrying professional gear, such as professional photographic or videographic equipment. Other indicia of being a journalist under this order includes that the person is standing off to the side of a protest, not engaging in chanting, sign holding, shouting slogans, or otherwise protesting and documenting protest activities, although these are not requirements. These indicia, she says, are only illustrative. You don't need to have all of them. So I suggest for your reporters, put on a press pass. I think that covers it. Identify yourself externally that you're a journalist. What we do as legal observers, we have a sign or a little badge that says legal observer, so that the cops can't go after us, even though sometimes they do anyway. The other thing that's great about this judge, she anticipates all the problem. So I won't read all the stuff, but she basically puts an affirmative obligation on the lawyers and the defendants to make sure that all the people ICE, DHS, local cops, federal agencies, that all these people are aware of this decision. And she also required them, I think as of yesterday, to give a report on exactly what the training consists of, so that there's no one who is out there, at least in Chicago, is not aware that this order enjoins them from doing the things that I just talked about. And again, this order at least is in effect until a week from today. Remember, it's only precedent for Chicago in this jurisdiction unless the government appeals it between now and Saturday. But the key here is to use these points to tell other people in other municipalities, that towns and villages, that this is the kind of thing that they should, I suggest, adhere to, so that if there are problems, you could then go in the next day, the following few days, to get an order saying, a declaratory judgment, that their rights were violated, an injunction for the future. So what I've learned when I was in the South in the 60s in the civil rights movement is one eye is on Saturday, but the other eye should be on using what's happening on Saturday for how do we enjoy and how do we declare rights for the future. And we need to do that because my premise is that as dark and as unprecedented it is as of October 16th, it's going to get darker and even more unprecedented and could potentially lead to martial law. So we have to start creating the legal precedents, at least in the lower courts. I can't speak for the Supreme Court anymore, but in the lower courts, a lot of the judges, judges in Chicago, the one in Portland, it's interesting, those judges that I'm talking about now, they're women judges. So I don't know what you make about that, but I've always felt women are much more empathetic to violations than us guys.
So I wanted to keep this also hooked into the narrative. So there's a very comprehensive piece by Lucy Campbell I'll be sending out in The Guardian, which may help inform what happened here with Judge Ellis. A video editor and producer for Chicago's WGN television station was arrested by mass federal agents on Friday morning. This was posted last October 11th. She was arrested by mass federal agents on Friday morning and later released during an ICE raid on the city's north side, as shown in videos shared widely on social media. Videos showed Debbie Brockman being violently forced to the ground by two agents before she is handcuffed and put in a van. A local resident filming the incident asked her name while she is face down on the street being handcuffed. Debbie Brockman, she replied, "I work for WGN. Please let them know." So this is not abstract. And also what we notice is that we had that situation happen where we had a Black Hawk helicopter and then a military type raid replete with rappelling down into windows and mayhem in a 5-story residential building in Chicago, and then doors being broken, windows being broken, people being taken out irrespective of their status, sorted by color and zip tied. So this isn't like a dystopian novel. This is like headlines from yesterday. And also, Norman,
and also,
go ahead.
let me add on that one, in paragraph H, she enjoins them from using force such as pulling or shoving a person to the ground, tackling or body slamming an individual who poses no immediate threat of physical harm to others unless necessary and proportional to effectuate an apprehension and arrest. Debbie, that woman, I bet you that paragraph comes in because of that and other people. There was a guy, one video really troubled me. A guy was standing on the public street and the Border Patrol guy dressed in his military stuff with his rifle on his shoulder approached the guy. The guy wasn't doing anything, just observing, and stood face to face to him. And he told him to disperse. And the individual knew his rights, and he said, "This is a public space." And what did the guy then do? Is very often, my experience is when the cop tells you to do something and you don't do it, they lose it. And what did he do? He grabbed the guy by the throat, threw him to the ground. The second guy, if I remember from the video, then jumped on them. They arrested him. So it's somewhat out of control. My experience very often is the law enforcement people, not all of them, a lot of good ones, but too many bad ones where they're not properly trained. And once they, in their arrogance, tell you to do X and you don't do it, even though what they're telling you is not lawful, they lose control and then it becomes physical. So the best thing to do is try to not to respond to them. And even if you're in the right position, don't get into an argument with them. Surely don't cuss them. When I was head of the Civil Liberties in New York, I used to tell people most of the stories where they interacted and then the guy said, "Fuck you," and then they went bonkers. So you got to be a little disciplined when you're out there. Otherwise, you could wind up being arrested for a while.
And so, what's interesting is a statement that was put out by Homeland Security to get a hold of the narrative they thought on Debbie Brockman's arrest. Quote, "In fear of public safety and of law enforcement officers use their service vehicles to strike a suspect's vehicle and create an opening as agents were driving Deborah Brockman, a U.S. citizen, threw objects at Border Patrol's car, and she was placed under arrest for assault on a federal law enforcement officer." And so, continuing in The Guardian, Brockman's arrest came days after prosecutors were forced to drop charges against anti-ICE protesters accused of assaulting federal agents while carrying weapons outside a Chicago immigration detention facility, with the move coming after grand juries refused to hand down an indictment in the case. And so, if you could talk a little bit, Norm, and we will get to the questions, about the intersectionality of the right of protesters and the right that we have as journalists, and how it's important, as you say, just reiterate, to have an esprit de corps and discipline, to recognize that as emotionally charged as a situation is, the power of our profession is maintaining a certain level of anthropological detachment.
That is correct. You've got to be the eyes and ears for the rest of us who are not there to observe what's going on, especially when there's abuse of power and a violation of constitutional rights. For the protesters, they have a right to peaceful demonstration. That word peaceful is very important. And when and if law enforcement, federal, state, local, are interfering with that right, the most important thing is to document what's happening. Video surveillance
what does that need to look like before you would vote to reopen the government? Or is a commitment from the White House and Republicans enough?
No doubt.
I don't know what that was, but anyway, I think that it's important to tell the story. And very often, unfortunately, the story is that we don't have the right to peaceful protest, especially when we're protesting against the government, which is going to take place on Saturday. And so for journalists, same thing like lawyers. I'm a technician. You know, I tell the funny story. The first time I was in Mississippi in summer of '66, I was so excited. I'm part of the Southern Civil Rights Movement. I want to be in the demonstration. And everybody was gathering on a Saturday afternoon in Jackson, Mississippi. And I said, "All right, I want to march." And one of the organizers came over to me and said, "Now, boy, we don't need your body with our bodies. We need your body to be on that sideline watching the bodies across the street," which were the state troopers, "who are in due time going to arrest our bodies and take us to jail. We need your body to get us out." So it was a learning lesson for me that I'm not the movement. I'm a technician to the movement. In due respect, I think reporters are in a similar light. You have to protect the freedom of the press and the right for the protesters for their right to protest peacefully. And the way we do that is to be somewhat detached. Of course, we're empathetic and probably agree with a lot of the issues that are being stated. But even if not, the ideological difference shouldn't anyway change what the rights are. Neutral principles should control. So the reporter should be detached, and especially when the violence, class example, let's say 2 or 3 cops are jumping on a woman. She's 5'2", weighs 100 pounds, whatever. The last thing to do at that point is jump in and get into the fight. The most important thing to do is to recognize at that moment, this could be a precedent-setting historical moment, and we have to record it. And we have to be able to use you as a witness later on. And if you're in the middle of it, you can't be that effective. I know it's hard to discipline yourself at that point, yell or scream. And the other thing is, if you're a reporter and you have some camera people, make sure the cameras are covering what is taking place before you. And again, I recommend states at least 10 feet away so they can't argue that you're obstructing their doing their job.
And so I would imagine, Norman, that also it means that you have to be mindful the degree to which you're going into chaos. You have to have the discipline of preparation. And chance favors a prepared mind. So don't keep the Trump ban bump button on, or any of the normal paraphernalia that you would have that would give an indicia as to what your political sensibilities are. Now, we have had some difficult situations play out. You've been paying very close attention to 26 Federal Plaza, which is in Lower Manhattan. For those who are, it's on the 10th upper floors of a federal building in Lower Manhattan. It is a place where ICE has its administrative courts. It's a place that's become a flashpoint for the nation and for the world, because what's been happening is when people who are dealing with the immigration system come with, often in good faith, responding to an appointment that they have set to come and make sure that they are in compliance with the law as directed by immigration judges, they're being unilaterally seized by ICE. And so a movement has developed to witness on their behalf. And it's very close quarters. It's very hard. You can't change your mind in the corridor. And so reporters, we did have an incident where a Turkish photographer, journalist, photojournalist, was put in the hospital by ICE agents. And so I Norma, I want to ask you, if you do get arrested, how should people conduct themselves? And what preparations would you advise them to make? And of course, you've been kind enough you'll be on call that day with us. And Lisa Loving is our, personal well-being coordinator for all the reporters. Give us some of those things that you think would be reasonable preparation in the event, thinking ahead that somehow you end up getting arrested.
Well, first on the 26 Federal Plaza, I've been there. I observed what was going on. And I didn't like what I saw, but I didn't make a big deal when I was there. I started talking and writing about it afterwards. But the reporters can be in the courtroom. You can't use a camera. You can't use your cell phone. You can't use a video unless the court or the judge grants permission. You can be in the hallway, but again, in 26 Federal Plaza, as Bob said, and I assume there's similar 26 Federal Plazas with other terminology in other municipalities around the country, and the corridors are very narrow. So the reporters, when I was there, they're pretty much up against the wall, again, so that the ICE agents there can't claim you're interfering with them, and you have a right to be there. There was a reporter who was following when the ICE people were detaining and potentially going to arrest a woman, and they went into the elevator, and he went into the elevator, and they physically pushed him out. I saw that video. Even in the elevator, he had the right to be there because it was public space, and the reporter needs to be there when they know the reporter is there, just as and they know the legal observer, the lawyer is there. When I'm there, they're deterred. They don't do the kind of physical stuff when we're not there. So you're actually doing your job but you're also protecting some of the protesters, because if they see that you're there and they recognize you're doing it professionally, detached, disciplined, they might not do the things that they would do if you weren't there. So again, I think you make a difference between public spaces and private places. The same thing, I'll just expand one other thing with regard to especially ICE. When they come to people's homes or they come to people's offices, they're allowed in the office situation if the reception area is open to the public. But they can't come into my office because that's private space. And they need a warrant signed by a judge, and the signature and the day that they're enforcing has to be within a 14-day period. If it's 3 weeks after the judge signed it, it's not valid anymore. And moreover, if it says they're allowed to go into space A, B, and C, but you're sitting in space D, they can't come in there either. And at home, what I tell people, if someone knocks on the door, don't open the door if they're an ICE agent. Ask them to put their warrant under the door and then take a look to see if it comes from a court as opposed to the Department of Homeland Security, because the latter one is not a valid warrant under the 4th and 14th Amendment. So those are the kind of things that generally you should know. And the key on that, and the same thing with regard to reporters, you have more rights in the public space than you have in the private space. And I think that the interaction, especially in DC, what was happening was, for example, I give you the best example, in the public parks there. So if you're from New York, it would be like Central Park. So in the parks, especially in DC, the Federal Parks Department, they have offices there too. So there would be a car that's traveling through the park, monitoring what's going on, which be from the Federal Parks Police. But right behind them, in another car, was the ICE agent. And the first car would stop someone because, for example, you can't have a truck in certain parks in DC. So a truck was driving through the park. Probably happens every day. But they'd stop that truck and start questioning the driver and the occupant. And if it turned out that they were dark-skinned, especially with the Supreme Court decision saying that race is a factor that can be taken into account for reasonable suspicion to detain someone, they'd start questioning the person allegedly for the violation of the park rules. But then shortly, the ICE people would get out and start questioning the people with regard to their immigration status. And the person could be detained, arrested for being undocumented, but never charged or prosecuted for the park violation. So that symmetry between the people who have now signed agreements in almost 3 dozen states around the country, that kind of symmetry between the feds and the local people are creating the kind of cooperation that Trump's asking for, but creating these kinds of what I call pretextual stops when it's really trying to then deal with the immigration and deporting someone. So you just, for reporters and all that stuff, just, video and report what's going on, because the argument that was first put out that they're going for the worst of the worst for undocumented people, not true. They're stopping people with green cards. They're stopping U.S. citizens, and they're not allowed to do that.
So, Norman, as a practical matter, we saw in the reporting on this, when you first brought this to my attention, I guess from January to August in Washington, D.C., as a place to look at, there were dozens, 80, I don't know how many ICE detentions. And then from August to September, it exploded to 1,200.
Right. That's exactly right. And so a lot of the arguments that are happening, first in LA, then DC, Portland's wonderful. I mean, the frog, the chickens, the bananas. I mean, for the people in Portland, I salute them. They knew how to diffuse this thing. It's not a ravaged war town. And so in the context of all of that, I think that cities have to be prepared to recognize that it's pretextual on the crime issue, even though there's crime like New York City. There's crime every day in New York, but it's been decreasing and there's ways to deal with it. But they're using the pretext of crime really to get to the immigration because they want to deport as many people as they can. And I read this morning this whole thing about they're going to change the immigration so that it's emphasizing white people. I mean, that's not what America is supposed to be about. And we, for 60 years, including myself as a lawyer for 55 years, my first job was the Voting Rights Act when I worked for the ACO in the South. And for 60 years, and after yesterday, can you imagine how I feel that they're undoing the Voting Rights Act?
Yeah, they're relitigating
6-3.
I would say
all of these things, what I'm saying, all these things are happening and they affect us in professional and philosophical, ideological. But at the same token, I as a lawyer and to you as the journalist, we have to be disciplined to understand historically what's happening so that we can record it. Because in due time, historians, reporters are going to write about this period. And our kids, our grandkids are going to say to us, Grandpa, I got 5 grandkids. Grandpa, were you around when Trump was doing this stuff? The answer is going to be yes. Then the next question inevitably is going to be, well, Grandpa, what did you do about it? And we need to be able to answer satisfactorily. And we have to recognize what our roles are historically. And again, I see reporters as so important in the South because of what happened on the Edmund Pettus Bridge with my friend John Lewis and Hosea Williams getting beat up with the Birmingham, Jim Clark and Bo Connor, all those folks. Reporters recorded that and the rest of America began to see what was happening. And I believe the majority of Americans don't agree with what's happening in our country, but we've got to inform them and educate them and not to be seen as propagandists, but as truth tellers. That's what we should be doing. And on Saturday, that's what we all should try to do and let millions of people who are not going to be out there see it on the TV, listen on the radio, and make their own judgments. And I do believe in due time, they'll reject the movement to an autocracy and want to preserve our democracy.
And so I just getting a little more background here because we also have to be aware of the arc of how this has been proceeding. Looking at the Society for Professional Journalists post, journalists in Chicago also reported abuse from the immigration officers over the weekend. On September 26th, ICE agents shot journalists covering a demonstration at the facility in Broadview, Illinois, with rubber projectiles and chemical agents. Agents also arrested reporter Stephen Held, who was released later that night. The next day, ICE agents shot a chemical weapon at reporter Azal Rizal's car while parked outside the Broadview facility on assignment, causing Rizal to vomit and experience burning sensation. So circling back again, it does appear there's an escalation of sorts. What is your advice if someone's arrested? If you could just give us this, I would imagine that it's important to have in your mind someone on the outside that you can reach out to, kind of plan in your mind, and how should you conduct yourself in the sorry event that you find yourself caught up in this?
Well, be as disciplined as you can, say practically nothing, and request to make a phone call to a lawyer. And I think that the supervisors, the people who are retaining, the people who go out on the field should have a lawyer or get in touch with the ACLU people, Lawyers Guild people around the country, Center for Constitutional Rights, There's also some new groups, Lawyers for Good Government, etc. I've told Bob that people can contact me on my cell phone during that day, and I can make suggestions, but you should prepare to have at least someone in whatever jurisdiction you are covering this stuff to get a lawyer. And there's plenty of lawyers, no one's going to ask for money. This is important. And just to have someone so on call to basically to go down to the precinct. The fact that a lawyer shows up at the precinct can substantially decrease the amount of time that someone has to stay waiting to be arraigned. And in some instances, like in New York, if I go into the precinct, I can get what's called a 3 or 4 hours. So it does make a difference to anticipate.
Norman, you blocked out for a second there. You said you can get what's called a blank.
Yes,
What was
A
that?
key noun.
A desk appearance.
So
Hours
hopefully-
before you're arraigned.
So Norman, this
So-
is a good point at which, and I want to thank you so much for all this information and taking the time. Stephanie Schubert, if you'd like to moderate, we're going to open it up to questions. We have some time. And then at the end, after we've totally taken advantage of Norman as completely as we can, we're going to, if you want to stay on, we'll talk about what's going to happen that day and all the things that'll be happening. So Stephanie, you want to open it up and see who
Yeah.
has any questions?
Thank you, Bob. I want to introduce myself. I didn't earlier. My name is Stephanie Schubert, and I'm with Pacifica Network. And I want to say, Norman, that it's a pleasure having you. And on behalf of all of us, we're just grateful to have your experience of law and life experience as well sharing today. Does anyone have any questions so far? I see on Davine on the chat, will this judge's 6-page decision be posted in the chat?
I'll let you take that now. I'll try to do that now.
Okay, great. And Norman, I didn't hear that last noun again that you repeated yourself on. I didn't hear it. Did everyone else hear it?
A desk appearance ticket.
Desk appearance ticket. Okay, thank you. Any other questions coming up? Okay, we're right here with you.
Ursula.
Hey, Norman. Thank you for this.
Right.
We have a point person, Lisa Loving, who's going to be the person to call if you get into trouble as a reporter. Will it be okay for her to contact you? Can she-
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Now, the one thing, I'm speaking in Hudson, New York. Don't ask me why the New York City rallies don't have any speakers. I'll put my own 2 cents in there. Part of these things is to inform and educate people, and you have to do that with speakers, but they're not having any speakers. They didn't have it for No King 1. They're not doing, but I'm going up to Hudson, New York. So during that period, from around 1 to 3, I'll keep my cell phone on, but that's the one period where it might not be available 100%, especially when I'm giving my presentation. But other than that, call me and I'll get back. I've said to people, I've seen enough, and thank you for the compliment, both Stephanie and Ursula, but I feel like I've prepared for this period, and I want to get that information out to people. I learned a lot by a lot of people that are no longer with us, who were from the Southern Civil Rights Movement, and they dealt with all this stuff in a very effective way. Dr. King, SCLC, SNCC, and we should learn from the past to deal with today, especially for the future for our kids and grandkids.
Thank you, Norman.
So just to be clear, You said the time period where you're not available is 1 to 3 Eastern. Did I hear that correctly?
It's the Northern District of Illinois, Eastern Division.
No, that you said there were specific times when you were not available.
Oh, well, the rally in Hudson is from 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock, so I'll be there. I'll have my cell phone, but in the crowd, they expect 700-800 people. Who knows whether you can get in touch with me, but if you just leave a message, I'll check the cell phone periodically during that period.
Okay, so that's 1 to 3 Eastern time.
Yep.
Okay.
And is there a place in the chat or somewhere else that is the best to get your number and Lisa's number?
I'll give it to you now, 347-907-0867. And Bob, you could put my cell phone number in the chat.
Awesome,
Also,
thank you.
I'm not-
Lisa, can you also put your number in the chat? And sorry, Bob, what were you saying?
I was just saying, the document, it says, due to format restrictions, I can't load it in. So what we'll do is if we have we're going to send this out on the same distribution list that we sent this announcement out. So you'll have it as soon as we finish.
Okay, awesome. I see Eugenia has a question or comment.
And okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I'm Eugenia Charles with Combit Lakai on WPFW here in Washington, D.C. With my program, I collaborate with a lot of other Haitian journalists who are either in Haiti or in other part of the U.S. Now, one of the questions that concern us, we may not be at the major protests on Saturday, but as journalists, if let's say in South Florida, if one of us gets stopped and ICE try to arrest us, what any suggestions you will have for us?
You got to have a lawyer, or at least an advocate who knows about the immigration law. And again, it would depend whether they're undocumented, whether they have a green card, whether they're here as a visa. So it all depends. But remember, the Fourth and Fifth Amendment allows people to be requiring, if they want to pat them down or search their belongings, they have to have reasonable suspicion to do that. And second, under the Fifth Amendment, you have a right not to answer, not to respond to most of their questions. And again, it depends on the status. There are some constitutional rights that non-citizens have that we citizens have, but they're not 100% the same. So it depends on your question, Eugenia. It depends on the individual's immigration status before I can answer that question generally. But the best thing to do is in communities to have a lawyer or an immigration advocate who is on call for things like that. I work with a particular group in New York City, and I'm on an emergency call list if any of their staff or clients are approached by ICE. We have various flyers that we hand out to people in different languages. But again, in addition to that, I think you need to have someone, a lawyer. And if you can't find someone, you're talking about Miami, or in any jurisdiction you are, people can call me, and there are usually ACLUs, because I worked for the ACLU for 25 years in almost every city, every state around the country. And if not, I might know some civil rights lawyers in places like Miami where I can get someone to be volunteering to do that kind of work for you. But it's always good to have that kind of backup, plan for the worst possibilities, and hope it never comes to be.
Yes, definitely. I appreciate that. So some of us are permanent residents, some of us are US citizens, and there's a large number of us who have TPS or who came through the Biden humanitarian parole program that were full journalists working in Haiti have now transitioned to the States. So I'll appreciate any assistance you can provide in that sense, and I've made note of your number.
Do you ever remember Jean Just?
Oh, yes,
Uh,
Father Jean-Just was a friend and a dear colleague.
Well, I represented him with the Haitian community when they did a huge violation of the rights at Grand Central. I work with the Haitian community in New York, and we could try to set something up in southern Florida so that there's people there that you can call
on a radio station in South Florida.
Okay, I have a colleague of mine who's also the general director for Balade FM who trying to see if he can interview you. So I'll reach out to you separately of this conversation so you can talk.
Okay.
And I am one of those boat people from Guantanamo Bay. So if you
Okay.
remember that era, so definitely thank you so much for your presentation. So I'll follow up with you.
Thank you, Eugenia.
Thanks, Eugenia. I just want to check in and ask, we are recording today. Are you comfortable, Norman, with having this on the Pacifica Network website via YouTube?
Sure.
Okay,
Use
great.
me in whatever way you can, as long as it's legal.
Thank you. Okay, we had a suggestion to upload it as soon as possible, so I'll do that today.
Okay, well, I'm a longtime BAI guy from when I was in college at Brooklyn College and NYU Law School. And the fact that Bob's trying to, recreate that period from the 60s, the BAI was so important to so many of us growing up to hear the truth. And I'm convinced that if we get the truth out, the overwhelming majority of Americans will not want an autocracy.
Norma, I just wanted to say, did you find it heartening that in response to Defense Secretary Hegseth's decision to require basically signing of an unprecedented prior restraint and loyalty order, that all of the news networks except One American News, all marched out with their personal belongings? Could you put that in historical perspective for us about how significant that is?
No, it's very significant. And yeah, I was elated by that because, they've gone after the lawyers, they've gone after the colleges. I was never a biggie for Harvard, but I became a biggie for Harvard when Harvard said no. There's been too much capitulation. And I think what's happened in the 9 months is that people are seeing the pattern and are connecting the dots in their own community in their own way, as opposed to us telling them what they should think. And I think people are recognizing we do vigils every Monday night, 6 to 7. We've done 26 of them so far since April, across from the federal courthouse in Foley Square. When I'm speaking on Saturday, I'm going to encourage people, I'll do it right now, set up a vigil once a week in your town, village, or whatever. All you need is like a half a dozen or 10 people with signs. Have a speaker come speak for 5 or 10 minutes about an issue, about what's happening to America, make it grow. And I think that it's important, and people are beginning to see the pattern of losing our democracy and what that really means to us, and that we don't want no kings. We don't want authoritarian government. We don't want an autocracy. And we have to then realize that if, for example, too many people say to me, hey, Norm, I can't take the newspapers. I can't listen to the radio. I can't watch MSNBC. It's too negative. That's exactly what the authoritarians want. The more people turn out, the vacuum that's there, they'll get more power and do what they want to do. We don't have to lose our democracy. We can preserve it.
Wow, thank you. It's amazing how simple you make it. Just saying, keep reporting the truth and they will get there. The people who need to hear it will get there. And that's It's nice. That's an easy thing to keep in your mind.
We are
And
the
the importance-
guardrails. We are the guardrail.
Right, the importance of journalists. I mean, people criticize journalists, and I always say to them, 90% of the time, in my experience, the journalists get it right. And, the idea of journalists being given an assignment and they've got to produce it within a few hours, I couldn't do it as well as the journalists do it. Do you make mistakes? We all make mistakes. But as Bob just said, you're a key component of preserving democracy if we tell the truth. And Stephanie, it sometimes is elemental. Sometimes the other side tries to connect it and make it more complicated and more confusing. I think neutral principles and telling the truth, it's as elemental as that sometimes, not all the time.
Heard. Anyone else have any thoughts or questions? So been really good questions. Bob, do you have any more thoughts or questions?
So I guess, Norma, I just want to thank you so much for a little bit ahead of schedule. We're running an efficient meeting. I want to thank you for taking all the time and being available and being so generous in spirit. And just thanks very much. Well, you're free to hang around, but I'm sure that there's some reporters getting in trouble right now who need your counsel somewhere in America.
All right. Well, I wish you all a good day, and let's hope America has a wonderful October 18th. And Stephanie, yeah, I do think in the long run, we will preserve our democracy, but it's going to get more darker before that happens. All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, Norman.
Thanks so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you so much.
Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.
People are starting to drop off. I'm sure everyone's busy. I did have one final thought. I just wanted to ask. I saw on social media that a French person said, when we protest, we keep doing it every day until we get what we want. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And then I thought, are we developing our own language with the priests in Chicago and the blow up frogs? Can we do it in a different way? I just wondered what you guys thought about that. I mean, it seems like we are doing it at we're finding our own language. Is that what you guys are seeing? Lisa.
French people have a protest. They do not mess around. And
Right.
they will shut down the entire highway system in the country. And these are the people who defined revolution. I mean, right? They helped us with our theoretical revolution. And so we could aspire, to that.
Yeah, they don't have however, they don't have Taft-Hartley. And it's Taft-Hartley that undermines the capacity to have a general strike in America, whereas France, the key weapon, even when it was the yellow vested protests, which weren't labor initiated, most of those demos that are effective are labor initiated, and they instantly shut down all of the operation of society. And that's just
Well, we got that part covered.
Well, it's harder to do in the United States, for real, where
Yeah.
all services are shut down, whereas in France it happens like that. So we still, from 1947 forward, we need to repeal Taft-Hartley. So.
Interesting.
And on that hopeful note,
let's go.
All right.
Thank you, everyone, so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'm so proud to be a part of this team. And I'll turn it over to Bob for the final thoughts.
Oh, just all thank you for all you're doing. I'm like a New Jersey diner 24/7 without the obnoxious blue cups. I always want to hear from you, particularly as we head into this, and just want to thank you all for really stepping up right now. And we are, like I say, we're the guardrail.
Go Guard. Have a good day, everybody. We'll see you on Saturday or hear from you.
Yeah, absolutely.
Take care.